Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to Freethought Hour. This latest edition features my co-host in her own classroom. How the devil are you, Tercia?
I'm good. Thank you, John. I'm doing well. I am, those who know me well enough might know I've mentioned in passing perhaps that I do a little bit of sort of cottage schooling, and I moved back to my home in the past week. So this is my classroom. I'm in my classroom. So you're joining me in my classroom with all my paraphernalia. So it's nice to have you and nice to be here.
It's a privilege. I hope you haven't got a cane, because we wouldn't approve of that.
No, I'm a very liberal thinking humanist, and I tend to go with what the evidence shows. And in that regard, it seems to me that there's more evidence that shows that beating children to help them learn is not very productive. So
Absolutely.
I tend to not go there. I don't do, even with my own kids when they were, you know,
Yes. Yes.
and,
Yes. We
I'm not really a violent person either.
we
So
dropped.
no,
We,
I try to avoid violence as a solution to problems at all cost.
we dropped corporal punishment about 50 years ago in this country.
Well, we were supposed to in South Africa. It's since 1994, but sadly, I have to report that it's still very prevalent in many schools and in many households.
Yeah, and I like
And
what you've got written on your blackboard.
you do.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
really.
it's nice.
Yes.
And
Should we introduce? I say, should we introduce our guest?
please do. Please do. I can't wait.
Richard, how the devil are you? Can we hear you? We can see you moving. Maybe you haven't got your microphone connected yet. He might be having a connectivity difficulty.
Oh, for a change, it's not me having the connectivity difficulties. Isn't that great?
We can see you moving, Richard. Can you hear us speaking? You can't. No? Would you like to go and come back? Maybe try that. He's in North Carolina.
Maybe there's a storm going through. Maybe there's a tornado. No, North Carolina is not part of the tornado alley, is it?
It can be, but he's on the coast, so he's in the more enlightened part. You know, very often it's more sort of progressive around the coast, and if you go into the hinterland, it gets more traditional, shall I say, politely. So he's still not.
I heard something.
There's a lag from you guys.
We can hear you. Good. Can you hear us? Here's what I suggest you do, Richard. I suggest you go and come back. Right? Let me put that in the messenger where we're talking. Try going and coming back. Okay, see if that works. Yeah.
In the meantime, John, perhaps you can give us some background about our guest.
Yeah. He, as I said, he's resident in North Carolina, but he also spends time in upstate New York. You know, not the city, but the actual state part of New York State, and he was raised, I believe, in Connecticut. So he's an East Coast person, and his interest, which is where I bumped into him. The reason that he's here is because I bumped into him on Facebook. His interest is in evolution as applied by theists to, the explanation for the origins of everything. And I think he's reached the stage now where he calls himself an agnostic. Yeah, he's nodding. Can you hear us now, Richard?
I'm an agnostic atheist now. Yeah. Probably between 15 and 20 years now. I don't know. It was kind of a gradual thing, I watched I lost you guys.
Oh,
Hello.
I'm in a chat. Dearie me. Okay, I'm coming.
Are those difficulties on your side?
Yeah, I've got somebody at the door. Apparently.
All right, there we go.
Okay,
There we go.
while John goes off,
Oh, okay.
I'd like to engage with you about terminology, since I always find it interesting how we use the terms atheist and agnostic. And I love that you call yourself an agnostic atheist, because I'm a bit of a stickler for terminology. And I think that to refer to oneself as an agnostic atheist is a very accurate description, because the word agnosticism speaks to—
You cut out at the end. The last part I didn't hear. You call yourself an agnostic atheist also?
Yes, I would call myself an agnostic atheist. I'd also label myself as a secular humanist, but I like the distinction that you implicitly make when you call yourself an agnostic atheist, because that means that you can be one can see oneself as a Gnostic atheist, which means that
even when I was a theist.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you're breaking up. Am I breaking up?
I don't know if it's just a lag. I think it's just a lag. I don't think it's breaking up. But
yeah.
Go ahead. Did you think of yourself as an agnostic theist as well while you were a theist?
I did. Yes, that's what I was going to say. Yes, when I was a theist, I never thought I knew God existed. I took it on faith, which is what they tell you to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. But what I love is that you use terminology the way I like it to be used. Many people use the term agnostic as sort of a sub-state between believing there's a God and then becoming an atheist, and I think that's muddying the waters, because so already we're off on a good foot.
Yeah, that Rich. Have you ever seen the Richard Dawkins spectrum? He 1 through 7. I think a lot of people go by that. I think that works quickly, but I don't think it's accurate ultimately. So
yeah,
I think a lot of people go.
Yeah, I don't think they're in the same category, atheism and agnosticism. So you can't really put them on a scale, because they're two different things. One is about—
I agree.
One is about belief, and the other is about knowing.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. Yeah. Now, generally, we believe things that we have, a relative certainty of. Okay. Yeah. So I think with religion, they kind of short circuits that whole. At least that's how I saw it. They one of the things I jotted down is they kind of want you to suspend your critical thinking when it comes to faith in God.
Yep. Absolutely. And, in fact,
don't ask that question.
That's right.
Don't ask that
question. In fact, in some religions, if you do criticize them, you're likely to get your head cut off.
Yeah. Well, when I was raised in a Roman Catholic family, and my mom spared me. She didn't send me to Catholic school, but she sent me to catechism. I went to a public school, but I had catechism once a week, which is the Catholic lessons,
Yep.
And so in one of my classes, they were talking about Jesus dying on the cross and his redemption. And I think I was 11, maybe 10 or 11, somewhere around that age. And I raised my hand, and it was a sincere question. I said, if Jesus was God and he knew he was going to live forever, then what exactly did he sacrifice? And the
Yes.
instructor grabbed me by the right ear and dragged me out to the hall. And she said, "You're a bold young man." And I was like, "You mean that as a, is that an insult?" I mean, because, my parents taught me to be bold too.
Yes. We need bold people. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Richard, you and I find that often our guests have more in common with me than with Richard, because Richard was never a believer. John. Sorry, John was never a believer. So
I've had enough.
John, Richard. I mean, it just breaks my brain. I'm just a mortal. Feeble woman from the southern tip of Africa, so please bear with me. But but you again, Richard, are in another class altogether, because I wouldn't have thought about even asking that question when I was 11. When I was 11, I just believed everything that was fed to me by the good people who indoctrinated me with many false beliefs. And I want to emphasize that I sincerely believe that they were, and still many of them are still alive, and I know many of them, they are good people. They are just they're sincere people. They're just sincerely wrong about something really important as well.
I agree. All my family's Catholic, still. I mean, and well, the ones that are left, my mom and dad have passed away, but they were good people. That's what they were fed, and you know.
Yeah.
Do you?
But
did you get
the one? I want to say this one thing. The one good thing was, prior to that, because I had an interest in evolution, well, fish and reptiles, but that led into evolution, because I wanted to study everything I could learn about, starting from when I was 6. As soon as I could read, I wanted to learn about fish and reptiles and catch as many snakes and lizards and fish and learn about them. So, and I had learned about evolution by the time I was 8. And I remember asking my mom in the car, I said, well, how can it be in the Bible that we were created in 6 days? Because the other thing is, in church, I wouldn't listen to the priest either. I would just pick up the Bible and start reading it where they left off, because I wouldn't follow along with the sermon. I would just read the Bible for myself. But so I asked my mom one day, what is it? How can there be 6 days of creation but evolution? She said, well, who are we to tell God how to create things? So for a while, I kind of just ran with that. Okay, I believe in God, but it was metaphorical. What you read in the Bible.
That puts it on the level of Humpty Dumpty, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. All of the fables we learn as children, that teach moral, things.
Exactly. So I was going to ask, did you, because most of your family, the ones that are still with us, are Catholic, do you get shunned, or are you in the closet? Do they not know that you're?
I kind of had a falling out with most of my family, but not for that. But it was because I took care of my mom from 2011 until the end of 2013. She had AC dementia, so I took care of her 24/7. And I knew my mom would never want to go into a home, so I said, look, I'm going to just stay. And they eventually, outside of my approval, they put her in a long-term care facility. And I can remember my cousin, I used to call her my aunt when I was younger because she was older than me, but she came over and said, well, your mom's going to be going to the home now. It's in God's hands. And I'm like, well, he must be missing a few fingers, because that was a real challenge to the little bit of faith I kind of had left, maybe if I had any, to that whole situation. And I'm not because I was angry at God, like they say. I just, how can all of the things they say, watching her mind decay, was the thing that made me realize that there's really no eternal soul. It really brought it home. I always suspected that, but watching that happen to my mom is really what drove it home for me.
Absolutely, no benevolent God would enable that to happen.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I just want to say, Richard, I have such admiration for you for taking care of your mom with dementia, because I haven't been in that situation, but I know enough people who have. And my parents are getting on. Fortunately, they're still strong and healthy and fit, and relatively mostly of sound mind. But I really admire you for doing that. And if there's any proof needed of the fact that if there's a God, he can't be benevolent. It is diseases like that.
No.
I had already leaned towards more of a deistic view of God, anyways. Because watching how nature worked, it didn't coincide with how they describe God in the Bible. I mean,
no. I have a similar.
Tended toward. Go ahead.
Sorry. I have a similar story because my mother, towards the end of her life, she went blind. She had macular degeneration, which is horrible because it's the middle of your vision. You just get black. It's like having, wherever you look, there's this black part. And it was, from my point of view, I did everything I could. I cooked for her, I took her out, and apart from tucking her up and taking her to the toilet, which you might have had to do, I understand, with dementia, I did, but I felt so powerless. There was, what could I do? And it was just horrible.
Mm.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. But I just want to comment on Christine Neubauer. I hope I'm saying that right. Who's commenting on the blackboard? I presume the only person that has a blackboard is me. And I just want to say that I'm an old-fashioned school teacher in my schoolroom, and I've written, especially for tonight's, Richard, I didn't write your name. I should have written your name. Freethought Hour on my blackboard. But talking about blackboards and schoolrooms, I want you to get a little bit into this whole thing about evolution and the fish and the reptiles. So because, and I'm asking this because I know a young man who's also a keen reptile. I mean, he has snakes, he breeds with them, but he's also a young earth creationist.
Oh, wow.
And so please, firstly, what about snakes made you feel curious about them? But that's on a very visceral, basic level.
It wasn't just snakes. It wasn't just snakes. And I think it was because my first fascination was bats. Okay, but that was very short-lived. Mm-hmm. And so I think really what it was animals that were kind of not in plain view, that snuck in and out of our sight, that fascinated me, because fish are like that and reptiles are like that. They slip in and out of our sight, and bats were like that. They would go disappear, then you'd see them at night going after the bugs and stuff. So I think that was the more of the fact, but that bloomed into a fascination for all animals, really. Not so much plants, but because I had to learn about biomes and environments, I learned about plants also. But but I like fishing too. So the fish came from me liking fishing. So
did you have any, or did you have any pets? Did you have a pet snake or anything?
I had dogs, cats. I had reptiles, turtles, snakes. I had trout. I had like 5 or 6 aquariums. I had catfish at first. I kept bass and perch, and then I got bored with that, and I went to the local aquarium place, and I said I want to keep trout, and the woman who, they had only warm water fish. And
Yeah.
she said, you can't keep trout, because back then it was very difficult to cool the water. So she's like, a trout, like a brook trout has to be in 68-degree water. Can't be much above that. A brown and rainbow, 72 is the highest. So we had a coal cellar, and I lived in Connecticut in the Berkshire. So I measured the temperature one year. I monitored the temperature in my bedroom in the winter, and it never got above 71, maybe 70. And then I went to the basement in the summer, and it never got above 72 in the basement. So I realized I could just keep them in my bedroom. I had a big bedroom, so I keep all the aquariums in my bedroom in the winter. And then once it started to get warm in the spring, I would bring them down into the basement and keep them in the basement. So I had trout for many years down there. Yeah.
I didn't realize you could keep trout because they grow quite big, don't they? I mean,
well, you give me a challenge. She said, you can't do that. And I was like, oh, don't tell me I can't, because
it's not like goldfish, which are quite small, but a trout is quite a big fish.
Well, I got them at the I would catch brook trout. I couldn't keep brook trout because they were too wild. They would jump out while I was sleeping at night. They would try to go, because I had an external filter, and they would find the water source and go. I'd have to get up at night and put them back in.
Yes.
So I would get the aquarium. I would get the hatchery fish, the rainbows and the brown trout, because the rainbows are from the the west coast of the United States, and browns are from Europe, right?
Yeah.
So we had them in hatcheries. There are some wild browns in New England, but generally I would keep the hatchery, and they would sell them to me about 6 inches, so they weren't too big. They would maybe get to the biggest about 8 inches. So
Yeah, I guess you can restrict them by keeping them in a smaller environment or habitat. Yeah.
Yep.
So okay, go ahead, Tercia.
Now, I wanted to ask whether you understand or do you think it's reasonable for fundamentalists to be attacking evolution as a scientific theory? Do you think?
Do I think it's reasonable?
Do you think there's any merit? Yes. Well, do you? What would you? Well, okay. What about the argument?
I'd never have.
I'm trying to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. What about the argument that I held for many years myself, that evolution is all right because God could create through evolution, but then that still doesn't address the problem of, there's so many scientific gaps that then that still aren't addressed. Even if you want to plug God somewhere in that theory, do you think it's at all possible?
Yeah, and then what Neil deGrasse Tyson says. Religion, our concept of God has become an ever reducing pocket of ignorance. As science proceeds and figures out this, then you can't have God there anymore. You got to move him to it, and that pocket of ignorance keeps getting smaller and smaller. Now, if that's where you want to put your God, and I guess I kind of did that. The way I see it, any theistic argument is really a God of the gaps argument. When you actually ask the person, I used to be a lot like Richard Dawkins when I first realized I was an atheist, very confrontational. Then I realized I probably want to be more like Anthony Magnabosco I don't know if you know about him. He does the street epistemology thing, the Socratic method. Yeah, to try to get people to see in their own way. So,
yes.
I don't like to be confrontational. People say you can't believe in God because So I try to highlight where, and so when I talk to people about why they believe in God, it's usually 99.9%. I can't even think of one case where it's not a God of the gaps argument when it comes down to it. When you finally get them to tell, and then they say, oh no, it's not God of the gaps argument. It's because I know. Yeah, that there's a pocket of ignorance is what you're saying. That's
Yeah. I think Neil deGrasse Tyson's view was it's like an evaporating puddle.
Yes, exactly.
That's where your God is, in that evaporating puddle.
Never receding pocket of ignorance is how he describes it. Yes.
Yeah.
So I have weird hobbies, and one of the things I often try to do is to confuse the YouTube and Google algorithm. So I make a point of watching things that go against everything I'm convinced of. And I watched an episode of Answers in Genesis the other day, and it was all about how it's impossible that whales were once land living animals. Because, am I right? And you have to correct me here. So the hypothesis at the moment is that all life came from the sea, went onto land, evolved, and then some species went back into the mammals, the sea mammals.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating to me to see, number one, how well produced this video was.
Oh yeah.
And I watched it as somebody who doesn't have a sound scientific. I'm not a biologist. I'm an English teacher. But what struck me was how I could absolutely see somebody with limited knowledge being convinced by that video, because it was all about how. So what would you say if I told you that whales were definitely not land living, and that there are no missing legs, there's no what was this? It was all about there are no intermediate fossil species. That was what it was about. There's no intermediate fossil species.
So God created an air breathing mammal to live in water. So that it has to come to the surface every so often to take a breath and then dive back down. I mean, yeah, that's how, Richard Dawkins has this, one of his like clinchers to try to get to the heart of it with young earth creationists or people who reject evolution, is the pharyngeal nerve in a giraffe, right? Because so in a fish, it's only a small path. It's only a small distance to where that would be. But as the neck gets longer, because necks don't appear until like tetrapods with after reptiles, right? Necks don't start to appear until like mammals so much. Like some reptiles have somewhat of a neck, but necks don't really, and they don't elongate until like something like a giraffe. So God created this pharyngeal nerve to go all the way from here up to here and then back down to, and oh yeah, that's how God, that's their, that's how God created it.
Was he an unintelligent designer then?
Well, you would have to think, but then they say, who are we to question God? That's always their, God works in mysterious ways, and
yeah, that's a cop out for everything.
The other thing I found interesting about that video, and I watched the entire 35 minutes of it, I must tell you, I need a medal for that, was not once was God mentioned. And I found that quite interesting, because why would you, do you know of anybody, and I was thinking that question in my mind, is there anybody who's not a theist, any biologist in particular, who does not accept the theory of evolution?
A very small percentage, and they're usually they work for Discovery Institute or Answers in Genesis, and they have to sign a statement of commitment to that. And usually their area is like molecular biology or something that's not like pertinent to evolutionary biology, which is you could be a molecular biologist and avoid all of the other stuff that might make you see. I used to go to a site back when I was a theistic evolutionist. This is one of the reasons why I kind of shed all of it, because for about 15 years back before there was Facebook, they just had forums. I used to go to No Answers in Genesis, which was always kind of the answer to, they had Answers in Genesis. So there was a site, No Answers in Genesis. And then there was another site, I can't remember the name of it right. Oh, Talk Origins. But and then I started going to this Fundy-owned site that was owned by Bob Enyart, okay, this Denver Bible Church, and it was called Theology Online. And for about a decade and a half, I would get on there and I would debate with the fundamentalist Christians, and I presented myself as a theistic evolutionist. I believed in God, and one of them said to me, "Oh, you're holding their hands to hell. You can't be. You shouldn't be nicer than God." I mean, there was these things they would say to me, like, it just made me realize they're just using this religion so they can be pricks. Not all of them, but a lot of the fundamentalists who are very hardcore in their beliefs and look down on other people for whatever reason. You shouldn't be nicer than God. What do you mean we shouldn't be nicer than God? First off, if God's the judge, why shouldn't we be nicer than God? First off, but that was just that was part of my evolution to. I considered myself a theistic evolutionist, and it wasn't. I don't know if you've ever seen. There's a video that was what
at that stage, Rich. You believed that God started everything and then let it run.
Yeah, and he would like tinker here and there when and like when Adam and Eve were probably a Homo erectus or the first Homo sapien. I didn't know. When the first thoughts of morality came into the mind, but then I looked at other animals that had some level of morality, like even dogs have some level of morality, But what really got me was I in 1998, my girlfriend at the time bought me Darwin's Dangerous Idea by Dan Dennett. Okay, and and I really liked that book. That book really brought it home for me. When he talks about these people, they're looking for skyhooks when all we need is scaffolding and cranes to explain the biological construction. That's the analogy he uses, and he made it very clear that these people are looking for skyhooks when we can explain it with scaffolding and cranes. And so I still was a theistic evolutionist until I saw one of his videos, How to Tell You're an Atheist. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but
right.
He kind of it's really good because
I don't think I've seen it. I'm going to make a note. How to tell?
You should watch it.
Dan died.
It made me realize a lot of the people around me are atheists and they don't even realize it. And this, like Jordan Peterson is basically, for all intents and purposes, Jordan Peterson's an atheist. He believes in this like Joseph Campbell concept but according to Dan Dennett, he's an atheist.
Rich, don't get me started on Jordan Peterson. I think I refer to Jordan Peterson as a Dostoevskyist. That's what he is, because I've never heard him say anything and not mention Dostoevsky.
Yeah.
Which.
I lost you guys. All right.
Are we back?
You refer to Jordan Peterson as what? Say that again.
As a Dostoevskyist, because I think I've never heard.
Yeah, he loves it.
He loves a hierarchical Dostoevskyist. That's what I refer to Jordan Peterson as.
And Carl Jung. He's a Carl Jungian, a Joseph Campbell type theist. Believes in what does he call them? They're like icons or. I forgot the term he uses, but his concept is just they're metaphors. They're metaphors. They're like symbols of things that exist in humans inside of our psyche.
John, I just have to read Dean's comment here because it's really good. I can see that God was the architect, the celestial knob twiddler that set things up, went to get milk and never came back. It sounds like me in the kitchen when I'm cooking, I think I'm a goddess in the kitchen because I do that. I put things on the stove and then I go upstairs and get busy with other things and then come back. Oh, and Jordan Peterson is audible chloroform. Yes, that's beautiful, I must say. Although not for he doesn't work on me.
I saw that.
But Rich, I want to ask you, in the United States, is there still an issue with evolution not being taught in schools and school boards not wanting textbooks that propose evolution? Is it still a thing, or is it, or do you not know?
Yeah, and it's increasing in the U.S. since Trump. Yes, there's a lot of places that are. Well, they've always been saying that the creationists always been saying, well, we should teach the competing theory. Well, there is no competing theory, really. I mean, creationism and intelligent design is not a scientific theory. There's no research program from it. It does not coincide with the evidence. For you to say that it does is really lying to the students. So, but they're getting by that, because of this whole this whole. It's like this U.S. has had, going back at least 150 years, we have these religious revivals. Okay, and I think the U.S. is going through another religious revival. Okay, and it's just going to have to happen. There's nothing I can really do about it except say my view, but it's going to happen. There's people who just don't want to accept evolution.
It's not a problem in Europe,
Not as much.
It's a problem in South Africa. In fact, I am a little bit of an activist, and I wanted to ask you whether you regard yourself as an activist. But just to get back to my comment, there's a major prize that was awarded to a South African academic, and the prize money is awarded by the Discovery Institute. And this person, the person who gets this prize, gets I think $1 million or something. It's a massive, and South African rand, it's a huge amount of money. And it's going to be used to advance intelligent design in our school curriculum. So not nice.
South Africa and Australia. Australia has a big population of young Earth creationists also. That's where Ken Ham is from. He came to the U.S. Thank you, Australia.
You can send him back.
Would you see yourself as an activist? What do you do? What's your day job? May I ask?
My day job, I renovate right now. Well, I renovate properties up here in upstate New York. People go to RPI. I renovate houses that a company buys so that students can stay in off-campus housing. And I have property in North Carolina that we rent out to my business partner and I down there. We rent out to employees because there's not much employee housing down there. There's a lot of tourism, and most of the houses are for tourists. So a lot of the employees who work at places don't have a place to stay.
Right.
We did the tourists for a while, but that was like a weekly thing, and it was much more of a hassle. So we decided to just go for the yearly rents, the yearly leases.
Do you still catch reptiles? Do you still have reptiles as pets?
Yeah, I caught a glass lizard down there. And there was a water moccasin. I live on a street called Saxon Cut. It used to be like an estuary, like from Pamlico Sound. It was a little strip of salt water that went over to one part of Pamlico Sound to the other, and went behind our house. It's gotten smaller over the years, but we dug it out, made it a little bit bigger again. So there was a glass lizard. I don't know if you're familiar with what those are. Those are lizards that have no legs. Well, they're born with legs. But they look like a snake. They're not quite as long as a snake, and they don't. You can tell that they don't move quite like a snake either. But there are some glass lizards that retain a small amount of legs, legs their whole life. Yeah. But a lot of them lose them completely, and so people think they're snakes, but they're actually a lizard.
So why would God?
Those down there. Huh?
Why would God create something that had useless legs that it lost?
Well, yeah, that's
No, he didn't. It was punishment, because I can just hear the answer. I mean, primitive people wouldn't have. They would have thought of those as snakes, And that was the
Well,
punishment
yeah.
because they have to eat dust and they have to sail
It's
on
proof.
their
It's proof of the Garden of Eden and the serpent in the Garden of Eden when he took the legs away, and yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So would you regard yourself as an activist, Rich?
Probably. I've been doing this for a long time on the internet, going back since the mid 90s when I got my first computer and started getting on forums. So probably yes.
Okay.
But I was always an advocate for evolution all the way even before that. But it wasn't as big of a thing until the internet popped up,
Right. Yeah.
Do you think that there's more of a battle between intelligent design and creationism, especially in education circles and in what people believe? Because I'm fascinated by this whole thing about that the role that evolution plays in Christian fundamentalism, because it seems to me that while all the statistics in many countries show that more and more people are identifying as nuns, which means NONEs, not believing in any deities, amongst the Christian population, I find an increase in fundamentalist beliefs like being pro-intelligent design and being anti-evolution. And, and I find that worrying because if you do that, you sort of you disregarding even the concept of theistic evolution, which is if those are the choices, rather than be a theistic evolutionist, because at least you give children especially the option of examining evolution, and then they can decide later on for themselves whether they think there's a deity involved or not. Yeah. What would you say to that?
Can I answer that? I think it's a personality thing, because you're either open-minded and can be persuaded and eventually realize that your religion was not correct, that there was no creation, there's no evidence for creation, but there is evidence for evolution. So you do what Rich has done and become an atheist, even though he was raised in Catholicism, or you're a dogmatic sort of personality, in which case you double down and reinforce your stupid beliefs even more strongly and become more fundamentalist.
Yeah, but they accuse us of being the ones who are dogmatic and not open-minded.
I know. Yes.
Yes. Well, what they're trying, what they're really saying is, well, you're using critical thinking when you shouldn't be. Is when they say you're not being open-minded, is what they're saying. You don't need to use critical thinking here. You just need to accept what I say or what the church says on this. Yeah. That's their concept of open-minded.
Well, in that case, I've got a Queen. I've got the London Bridge that I would like to sell them. In that case,
yeah. What claim can't be made? This is the thing, it took me a long time to realize that I was an atheist and to realize that faith was something that I really was not valuable to me, because what claim can you make in faith that, you can make any claim. It could be completely false. And if you just say accept it on faith, what can you do to disprove it? What can you use to verify it? Well, I have faith, I think it was Sam Harris. I have faith that what's her name? Angelina Jolie secretly loves me. He's drawn an analogy. And it makes me feel better, and so therefore I'm going to believe that Angelina Jolie secretly loves me.
Yeah, and I have faith in my teddy bear too.
Yeah.
I want to ask.
I jotted some things down because I was watching. Yeah, go ahead.
Please go ahead.
I was watching. Rich. After I get done with you guys, though, I don't know if you're familiar with Gad Saad, right? He's an evolutionary psychologist.
And that's the only sort of psychologist there should be.
Well, he does have. I've got some criticisms for what he says, but mainly on the political science side.
Mhm.
Give me
he's
that
got some
name.
pretty
Is it Gad?
sad.
Yeah, it's
Spelled
GADSAAD.
right. So, anyways, he's got a discussion with Jordan Peterson that I had queued up after I get done with you guys that I want to watch because I can't wait to hear them discussing this.
Yeah,
I like to, I'm kind of like you. I like to hear other views because I might be missing something too. And I do listen to what creationists have to say. They might have a point. I haven't seen a good one yet, and it's been 40 some years.
I just think it's really dangerous that because evolution is not such a. It's very simple. It has a simplicity to it, but there's also many things that we don't understand about it. And in science communication, even good science communicators often use words that the layperson, the uneducated person in the field, and I regard myself as that, find confusing. And one of those things is this idea that has I don't know where it comes from, but even if you look at that classic T-shirt, or with the that shows the
from the
the
monkey
the
evolving
man,
to it, yeah.
That
The rise
even
of
that,
mankind.
yes, but that leaves the impression that evolution is about some kind of progression.
Yeah.
Which is completely not the case.
Yeah.
Right.
And
right.
I often hear that's one of the greatest fallacies that I think science communicators and people like us often fall into that.
It leads to a progression, but it's not a planned progression. I mean, there tends to be a progression, okay? But the only important thing with evolution is reproductive advantage. So this is why you have like blind cavefish, okay? Or the snake, the lizard that's losing its legs. When something is no longer needed for a reproductive advantage, evolution co-ops it for another use. It co-ops that genetic space. It doesn't need to use the energy to create that and for the phenotype anymore. So there is a progression, but it's not always like people. One of my best friends I grew up with, I go see him every weekend or so, every other weekend. He's like, well, how come humans are the only intelligent things? How come monkeys haven't become intelligent? And because intelligence, first off, our level of intelligence is not the only thing that gives a reproductive advantage. And they found a niche, that works for them.
In fact, a virus can wipe us out within 5 years if the right virus, despite our intelligence that has given us many advantages in terms of competition with other species. But so did you? I see you answered Dean's question, John. That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Question, just which animal has been around the longest without the selective pressures forcing them to evolve? Could it be the Komodo, the woodlouse? Yeah, what about the octopus?
So I don't know that. You'd have to ask Aaron Ra that. Aaron Ra would know that one.
You know what? I did an interview with Aaron Ra in South Africa in 2020.
Oh, yeah?
Just before find it on the internet. You can Google me. It was a very nice interview.
I'm gonna.
It was he was in South Africa on in the Karoo on a fossil expedition. Yeah. And it was about a 2-hour drive from where I live, and we drove out and we interviewed him in Albert, with the town something Albert. I don't remember the town's name. Prince Albert. Yes. He didn't find any fossils. But he did find many snakes though, which he thoroughly enjoyed.
Yeah, he keeps snakes.
He loves snakes.
John, can I ask my question? We have 10 minutes left.
Okay.
Can I ask it?
Go ahead. Yes.
John sometimes humors me. Do you think that we have free will, Rich?
I'm pretty much a compatibilist, like Sam
damn.
Harris. Okay, I think what? I think that we have. This is how I see it. We have instinctive behavior and we have learned behavior. We learn certain options, and then we can choose between them. If we haven't learned those options, we don't learn we can choose them. So there's where our choices lie and what our learned behavior is, and that's the only free will we really have. But it's confined by what we've learned. I can't. These people say it's all predetermined. I don't know. I mean, I guess if you ran the whole universe from beginning to end, and there's some who say it's quantum indeterminacy that gets us out of it. These are questions that are beyond me to some point.
Okay.
I think I'm more of a compatibilist though.
Okay. You're just a snake evolution and compatibilist guy. Okay. Well,
you don't think? Are you like Robert Sapolsky? Robert Sapolsky thinks we have no free will.
That's me.
He's convinced everything's predetermined. Okay, I can respect that view. I can see where it comes from, and I watch him all the time.
We must get him on the show. We must get Robert on the show.
We must.
Yeah. He's great.
Absolutely must. Yeah. Did you, if you want to, just this morning, I watched a very interesting discussion between Alex O'Connor and another philosopher by the name of Alex, whose surname I can't remember now, on the Unbelievable show. And they had a debate in a high school with high school kids as an audience, which I think is brilliant, about free will versus determinism. Determinism versus compatibilism. And it was fascinating. I loved it. So I can plug the Unbelievable show. John has been you've been a guest on the Unbelievable show, John.
I have, yes, and I've also Alex O'Connor wrote the foreword to one of my books.
I'd love to get. Are you familiar with him, Rich?
Yes.
He'd be a nice.
I'm familiar with all the big names out there. That's pretty much what I do. And when I get home from work, I'm watching that stuff.
So who's your favorite evolutionist? I hate that word. No, I take that back. I hate that word evolutionist. There's no such thing. Who's your favorite modern biologist or
evolutionary biologist?
I wouldn't say it was a biologist. I've always, ever since I read Dan Dennett's book, but he just passed away recently. But he just always breaks things down, and he reminds me of the philosophy professor I had at UConn too. He has that same way of teaching, and anything he has, any of his videos, anything he has to say. His discussions with the Four Horsemen. There's this one great. It's a really long video, but it's a roundtable discussion, and it's way back when Stephen Gould was still alive, with Dan Dennett, Stephen Gould, Rupert Sheldrake. I don't know if you know. He believes in formative causation, and so all these. What's his name? A couple of the big physics names too. I can't remember right now, but anyways, it's if you look up a 3-hour roundtable with Dan Dennett and Rupert Sheldrake, it'll pop up. If you have the time, I watch it like half an hour here, and I go back and watch another. But I've watched it a couple of times. It's pretty interesting all the things they go through. They're just these 7-8 top minds in different fields discussing what science has led. Oh, and what's his name? The guy from Awakening, the psychologist from Awakening. I can't think of his name.
I can Google it. Let me have a look.
The one that Robin Williams played. He's a real person. You ever seen the movie Awakening? Robert De Niro. because that's based on I can't think of that guy's name, but he's good too. Even though he gets a little off on tangents, but he's really good to listen to, you know. But he's in that too. So it's all these people sitting around talking, and they discuss religion and creationism and how you could research. Like Rupert Sheldrake, he's a Christian, and that's why he tries to bring informative causation, and you know he believes it's basically Plato's idea of the form, that there's a true form of things out there, and that God has like made it become manifest. You know, that's his. It's interesting though.
If
Dr. Sayer. Dr. Sayer.
Huh?
Dr.
Yes.
Sayer.
That's him. Yes, that's him.
I want to ask, if you had 5 minutes and you knew that the person that you were speaking to would be open to be convinced, what would your best argument be to convince a young earth creationist that evolution is a theory as real as the theory of gravity?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'd like a go at that in a minute.
You know,
did I stump you?
Yeah, you know, the thing is, I'd have to cover so much information that they probably, you know, there's so much from that you have, you know. I mean, do I go back to stromatolites? You know, where do I start? I mean, this is why I like Anthony Magnabosco's way, because if these people make claims about something that a deity or something supernatural, you ask them. I mean, we know that there's physical things here, right? We know. I mean, unless you want to debate that we're in a matrix or whatever, and that this is all, but you know, you have to start at square one. You have to believe that there's an objective reality. That there's some real thing here. There's real things. These things are real. Okay, and these are the things we can look at.
Can I tell you
and
what
demonstrate?
Go ahead, John. I want to hear. Maybe I need it one day. Maybe I'll need this information. So let me perk up and take notes.
Well, I'd say, look at your family. Look at your brothers and sisters. Are they identical copies of you? Or do you show variation? And if you accept that there is variation, then you've got to accept that the environment can filter it. We live in an environment, the environment can change, and then some of those variants might succeed better than others. That's evolution.
That's the best way to explain it, but they're going to go with the macro evolution thing.
Oh, you know? I was going to, yeah.
God created us a certain way, and we can, you know, you're within that range, and you know, a dog can't give birth to a cat. You know, that's
a fish can't give birth to
a turtle.
To a frog.
Well, we're all fish, really. You know, if you go back, enough generations, our original ancestor is, well, not the original, but our remote ancestor is a fish.
Yep.
Well,
that's why we have the recurrent laryngeal nerve.
Mm-hmm.
I have absolutely no idea how I would answer my own question, but what I do see as the main problem that we have in not grasping evolution is the fact that we just find it almost impossible to comprehend the eons and eons of time that evolution requires, which we have proof of because of geological time.
Yes.
And that's why creationists have to end up questioning all our dating methods, because if you can accept that the Earth is billions of years old, then you have the time that is needed.
Absolutely.
You didn't know all the geological strata was laid down by the flood? Come on.
including the metamorphic and igneous rocks, of course.
Yeah.
They,
Yeah. And
they were products of flood.
it just so happened to sort things out where these ancient organisms exist way down here, right? Those were the ones who died first, even though some of them had wings and some of them had legs, and
Well, I'm glad you mentioned time, Tercia, because we run out of it.
Yeah, as we always
I had a
do.
great time. Thanks for having me on.
So great. So I just want to announce that next week we have another very interesting guest in the form of Christine Wynn, who I've had some chats with her on Messenger or one of the probably Twitter messaging or something. But you've heard of synesthesia, haven't you? Where the senses get muddled up and you see colors where there aren't any, and you hear things that, well, I don't understand it, but she's an extreme version of that, and that's going to be an interesting chat.
Yeah.
And I look forward to that, and I want to thank our five at one stage, John, we had 5 eyes looking at us, which is brilliant. Christine, it was lovely to see your comments. Dean, it was lovely. James, and I didn't see any other names in the comments, but it was lovely to be here. Thanks for watching. Rich, thank you for your time. Good luck with the battle against the intelligent designers out there, and keep it up.
All right. Thank you for having me. Thank you both very much.
And thank you for future viewers as well. Say bye-bye.
Yes.
Bye.
Take care.